If you've ever stared at a blank workbench and thought, I could turn this into a shop, but I'm scared I'll just end up with a pricey paperweight, you're not alone. I get that hesitation, especially when the next big purchase is a CNC router that promises precision, power, and the ability to turn wood, acrylic, or even soft metals into anything you can imagine. You've probably asked yourself whether the machine will actually cut the way the ads say it does, whether it's a good fit for a home workshop, and if you'll be paying for features you never use. It's a lot to weigh, and the last thing you want is to spend a chunk of your budget on something that just sits in the corner gathering dust. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. First off, let's talk about what the FoxAlien Z-Pro actually brings to a small to medium workshop. The package isn't just a frame and a motor, it includes an upgraded set of linear rails, 3 spindle clamps, and a suite of 4 closed-loop stepper motors. The linear rail upgrade is the first thing most buyers notice because it turns what would be a typical wobbly hobby-grade motion system into something that feels almost industrial. In practice, that means when you run a 1/8 inch CH pocket cut in a piece of plywood, the gantry stays rock steady, and the resulting cut edge is clean enough that you rarely have to sand it down before finishing. That kind of consistency is where the real value lies, not in the headline 400W spindle rating, but in how the motion components translate that power into repeatable accuracy. Who should be buying this? If you're already comfortable with the basics of CNC operation, knowing how to set up a workpiece, generate code, and handle basic maintenance, then the Z-Pro is a solid step up from an entry-level machine. Think hobbyists who are moving from a 300mm x 300mm router to a 600mm x 900mm work envelope, or small business owners who need to produce parts in low volumes without outsourcing. The linear rail upgrade makes a noticeable difference if you're cutting tight tolerances for things like jigs, enclosures, or decorative inlays. Another group that benefits is educators who need a reliable machine for a classroom where students will be experimenting with different materials. The closed-loop stepper system reduces missed steps, which lowers the learning curve for newcomers. On the flip side, you might want to skip this one if you're still in the first CNC stage and haven't even figured out the software workflow. The machine size and the need for proper assembly can feel overwhelming if you're still trying to decide whether a desktop CNC should be your next tool. Also, if your projects are limited to very small, low-resolution tasks like simple engraving on small acrylic tags, the extra travel and the higher precision components could be more than you need, and a cheaper, more compact unit would get the job done faster and with less setup time. Now, let's dig into the day-to-day experience. When you unpack the Z-Pro, the first thing you'll notice is the modular frame. It's designed to be bolted together with fairly standard hardware, and the linear rails slide into pre-drilled slots. The real payoff shows up after you tighten those rails and run the first calibration routine. Because the rails are precision cut, you'll feel almost no play when you jog the X or Y axis by hand. For a user who has used a cheaper router that squeaks and shudders at a few inches per second, the upgrade feels like moving from a wooden wagon to a steel train. The 4 closed-loop stepper motors each have Hall sensors that monitor actual position, so if a motor ever loses steps, the controller corrects it instantly. In practice, what that means is fewer lost cuts and fewer headaches when you're mid-project and the machine decides to pause unexpectedly. The spindle system is another practical point. The Z-Pro ships with a 400W spindle and 3 clamps, allowing you to switch between a 1-inch collet, an ER16 collet, or a small router bit without much hassle. In my testing, the spindle held up well on dense hardwoods, it didn't lug, and the cut quality stayed consistent up to about 15,000 revolutions per minute. If you need to work with softer materials like MDF, acrylic, or even PVC, the spindle's power is more than sufficient, and you can dial the speed down for cleaner edges. The only downside here is that the spindle does generate a noticeable amount of heat after longer runs, so a modest cooling solution, like a small desktop fan, is advisable if you're planning marathon sessions. One hidden trade-off that shows up once you start using the machine regularly is the need for a solid, level floor. Because the frame is relatively large, any unevenness in your workshop surface translates directly into the gantry's motion. I've seen a couple of owners who tried to set it up on a cheap laminate table and ended up with a slight wobble that manifested as ghosting in the final cut. The fix is simple: place a sturdy workbench,